Good morning, this is Faith at Faith and Books, and I have a little bit of free time because the little 5-year-old is at music camp every morning this week, although yesterday he had a cold and I kept him out, but I don't think the cold's bad enough to keep him out. So, so I've been trying to use the free time to focus on cleaning my house, which desperately needs cleaning, and also we're having some cool weather. So I've been out in the garden weeding like crazy. In spite of the fact, I have to be careful. I have to do it in like really short bursts of energy, like 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, because I'm nervous about my back. But anyway, so I've been in kind of a reading slump. Also, we've had a lot of car issues, which I don't even want to go into. But so I've just been in a reading slump. So I haven't finished any book. I'm still reading Laura's. I only have a little bit to go, so I'm determined to finish it today. I've been having a very nice exchange on Voxer with Christy from Dostoevsky in Space about it. I look forward to talking to her more about it. She's been sort of overwhelmed, but still, every interchange we've had has been really insightful. So I'm enjoying that book, and again, this is a reread for me. I'm very impressed by it. I feel like I could read it again. There's a lot to it. And then I started Paradiso or Paradise. I've only read 2 cantos though, so I've fallen behind, but I have gotten started at least. I started this last week, and I got this far, and then went to page, what is that? 37, and really gripping, really interesting, but I just haven't been able to pick it up again. And I've been reading the biography of James Madison on my Kindle, and I haven't even picked that up to read at night. I don't know what's going on with me. I'm just really in a slump. And we have 2 chapters left in this for my Christian book club. So hopefully we'll be done with this in 2 weeks. It's been very, very fruitful and edifying. I've enjoyed it the whole time. So, but that's where I am. I haven't finished anything. So what I thought I'd do is a tag. I haven't done a tag for a while. Oh, I just lost it. Okay. So I was not tagged, but this was a tag that originated with Book Time with Elvis. And I saw his marks. And then I saw Christina at Knitting Books, etc. And this is going to be a several-part tag. It's called the Interrail Eurorail book tag. So I don't know who to tag because it kind of is about traveling in Europe. And I don't know who's traveled in Europe. Maybe Tom, LA Books. He's from Europe, so I'm assuming he's traveled a lot there. So I'll tag you, Tom, if somebody else hasn't tagged you already. And but if you've traveled to Europe, or you don't necessarily have to have traveled to Europe, it would be helpful, but you could apply it to other travel if you haven't traveled in Europe. So feel free to look at the tag, and if you want to do it, then go ahead and do it. Consider yourself tagged. So let's see. So this is how it goes. It starts, you begin your journey in London. Dr. Johnson said, when a man is tired of London, he is tired of life, for there is in London all that life can afford. What book can you read, reread, read again and again throughout your life? So for me, I've reread many books. I feel like I'm a broken record. I just keep mentioning the same books, but David Copperfield is one that I read when I was, 12 or 13 or something, and I've reread it several times, at least 5 times since then. So that's one. When I was younger, I would reread the Little House books over and over again. I did that like through high school. They were just pure comfort reads. Another book I thought of that I reread like within the last 2 years was My Friend Flicka, which people think of as a child's book, but it isn't. It's adults appreciate it probably more than children. And it's not about a girl and a horse. It's about a young boy growing up on a ranch. And it's, they Hollywood really changed it. But My Friend Flicka by Mary O'Hara is one of my favorite books. And that's something that I've been able to reread you know, I read it first in childhood, and I just reread it a couple years ago, and I still found it satisfying. So, all right, so that's my answer to that first one. Sherlock Holmes lived at 221 Baker Street. Have you ever visited the home of an imaginary character, and if so, whose? So I thought of two examples, but one is the actual home, is the character. When we went on a trip up to Boston, one day we took a ferry to Salem. And in Salem, it's a fun place. It's very campy because it's all, you know, witchcraft and Halloween and stuff. But it's really interesting old sailing town as well. And they have the house that inspired Nathaniel Hawthorne to write The House of Seven Gables. So we didn't actually go in, and I don't know if you could go in, but we saw the outside, and then they had like this little museum or information center outside that you could go in and learn all about Nathaniel Hawthorne and the house and that sort of thing. So, and I saw the house, and it's right there near the shore, this big old house. I saw the house, and then a few years later, I finally got around to reading the book. So I really appreciated that I had seen at least the outside of the house. So that's one thing I can think of. The other thing I can think of is that, and I've mentioned this in videos before, that when my daughter, my oldest daughter, who's now 30, maybe when she was 9, she was into American Girl dolls, especially the first one, Felicity, and that is in Williamsburg, Virginia. And so we went down to Williamsburg for a vacation, and we did the Felicity tour. And so we got to learn all about what life would have been like in the 1700s in Williamsburg, and we learned how they did tea, and we sewed a little sampler, and we learned some dance steps. We did a tour of, you know, the kind of house she would live in and that sort of thing. So that was fun. So that was the Felicity tour, Felicity being a fictional character. So those are the two I could think of for that. All right, the next one. Harris asked me if I'd ever been in the maze at Hampton Court. That's a quote from 3 Men in a Boat. Have you ever been lost in a book and not in a good way? Did you completely lose the plot and not have the slightest idea what was going on? Please give an example. So I can think of two. One, I'm ashamed to admit, is War and Peace. I cannot get through the first couple of chapters. The names confuse me, and I'm completely confused. I don't know what's going on, and the book is so thick, it just daunts me that I can't get a toehold, and I give up. So War and Peace has defeated me repeatedly. And the other one that came to mind was when my oldest daughter was in college. She came home for, I don't know, Thanksgiving or something, and she had to read this book, and she was complaining about it. I'd never heard of it. It was called The Education of Henry Adams, I think. And I said, really? And so she was doing something, and I took it, and I went to take a nap or something, and I tried to read it for a couple of hours, and to me, it was truly impenetrable. Like, the writing style was so overly formal and, you know, just high. It was just so snooty and overly educated and pretentious, and I could not get through it. So that's another book that defeated me because I just couldn't get a toehold. All right, so the next one is, you head to St Pancras. Pancras? I don't know how you say that, it's French, and board the Eurostar to Paris. And within a couple of hours, you arrive at the Gare du Nord. Oh yeah, I think that's right. The Père Lachaise Cemetery is on your itinerary. Have you ever been there? Or have you ever made a pilgrimage to any literary site? I've not been to that cemetery, even though I have been to Paris a couple times. What are some of the best historical sites you have visited? Okay, so, all right, have you ever made a pilgrimage to any literary site? The one that comes to mind, I know when I was 16 that we went to Westminster Abbey, and there's a graveyard there, and I'm sure we saw a lot of famous people buried there, and probably including authors, but I have no recollection of who we saw. But what I do remember is my husband and I went to Italy, and this was, gosh, 31 years ago, something like that. And we were in Florence, and of course doing all the Renaissance Florence things. And we saw that, we saw a site for Robert Browning and Elizabeth Barrett Browning's apartment in Florence. And so I said, oh, I want to go see that. So we went in, and it was really interesting. One of the interesting things is in Florence, you know, it's all these old buildings, so you can't imagine what it looks like inside, because everything looks kind of small and narrow and kind of decrepit. But it was this beautiful apartment inside with this big like parlor, a sitting room, and an area to dine. And I'm trying to remember now, and it was pretty simple, but it, you know, it was decorated in that very Victorian style. That was really interesting. So I think that's the one that stands out in my head. And I've always really liked Robert Browning's poetry, and I haven't read enough of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, but Robert Browning I just like because he has such a sly sense of humor, and he tells stories with his poems, like the Pied Piper is a prime example, but also My Last Duchess, and the one about Brother Lawrence, Grr, There Goes My Heart's Abhorrence. Yeah, that one. So I think, I was even thinking, this tag prompted me to think, I'm going to read those for Victober. I'm going to read Robert Browning and Elizabeth Barrett Browning for Victober. They're going to be my poets in October. So yeah, so I'm glad I did this tag. So yeah, I remember visiting their apartment in Florence. What are some of the best historical sites you have visited? Gosh, every site is interesting. I don't know if I can answer that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to pass on that one. There's just so many. Gertrude Stein famously said, "America's my country and Paris is my hometown." What is your country? What town other than your own have you felt at home? Well, I live in the United States of America, and I haven't lived very many other places. I lived in Baltimore for 3 years. I really enjoyed living in Baltimore. But other places that I visited, that I've stayed for a little bit, is about 10 years ago, we went to Paris again for almost a week, and then we went to Avila, Spain for almost a week, and staying in Avila was really interesting. It's this old medieval town. The walls of the whole town are still intact, so it's like a UNESCO site, and it's like stepping back into the Middle Ages. It's just the streets, it's just so captivating. Really, I really enjoyed staying in Avila. And then another place where I stayed for a month, but this was back when I was 18, was in Angers, France, because I was studying French for a month with my aunt. And that was neat to live in a French city for a month. That was, I really loved walking around Angers. So I'll say Angers and Avila. All right, next one. Cafes are everywhere in Paris. I like to sit in one for even for a couple of hours, skimming through a book and people watching. If you have been to Paris, what is your favorite place to visit and favorite thing to do there? If you haven't been to Paris, what would you like to do, and what would you most like to see and do there? So I have been to Paris twice, once when I was 18, and then once, when I was about 50. And both times it was the Cathedral of Notre Dame, I think, which I was so sad when it burned. I really was so grieved when watching that. I couldn't stop, I was glued to the TV watching the fire. Yeah, I think it's Notre Dame because it's such a, in the skyline, it's such a iconic view, and just the way it almost looks like a ship, and you see it from different angles and different parts of the city, and then going in, and it's so dark when you go in, but then you look up and you see these gorgeous stained glass windows and the gorgeous rose windows, and just to think how old it was or is, and how many people have gone through it, and how many famous people have been there, and yeah, it was Notre Dame. That was the one that impressed me the most. And then the last time we went, we did something we kind of did it on the spur of the moment, but we saw that you could go to the Jewish Quarter, and we went there, and it was this really old part of town, so it felt very medieval. And they had put up plaques on the wall of people who had been deported by the Nazis. So their neighbors, you know, I think on the plaques they even said who had told the Nazis that reported on these Jewish families and that had them deported. So the name of the family and the name of the person who ratted them out. So yeah, that was really a very moving thing to see. Yeah, so that's something that really stands out from my last visit to Paris. All right, after a few days of eating pain au chocolat and drinking one too many café au lait, you decide to head south. You go to the Gare du Nord and board the train to Madrid. It will take you 11 hours and 26 minutes, and you will travel 654 miles, or 1,052 kilometers. What is the longest train journey you've ever taken? Have you any favorite books or films set on trains? So I think the longest train journey that I took was with my husband when we were in Italy. We got on a train in Venice, and we went all night long, and in the morning we were in Naples. So we spent the whole night. That was an adventure in itself because we almost got robbed. Yeah, you have to be careful in Italy. Yeah, so that was it. Venice was we were there at the very end of October. It was so cold and rainy and raw. We could not get warm. Our little, our whatever you call it, our little inn was just, it didn't have any heat. There was no hot water. We were miserable. So we just spent the bare minimum in Venice. Like we saw St. Mark's, we saw the Piazza. We had multiple overpriced hot chocolates at the Florian's there because it was the only way we could get warm. And then we left, and we went on a gondola ride, and then we decided where we were getting out and going south to where it was warmer. So we rode on this train, and I don't remember how many hours it was, but it was all night long. So I think we got on, I don't know, 8 o'clock in the evening, and then 7 o'clock or I don't know when we arrived in Naples. And then we had to switch to a kind of commuter train, which looked exactly like the metro in Washington, D.C. It was the same exact company and design. It was so weird to get on that train and go, wow, this is like the metro at home. But yeah, then we went to Sorrento. I had a wonderful time in Sorrento. But anyway, so that I think is the longest train journey I've ever taken. And do I have any favorite books or films set on trains? I've read 2 books by Paul Theroux, I think is how you say his name. Riding the Iron Rooster or something. And I read that ages ago, and that's about traveling through mostly China. And that was very interesting. And then just not that long ago, a few years ago, I read the old Patagonian Express, where he literally takes subways and trains from Boston all the way down to the tip of South America. He rides trains all the way down. And that was a really fascinating book too. So I think those are probably my 2 favorite train travel books. Have you any favorite books or films set on trains? Well, there's the, what's it called? It's by Mary Reinhardt Roberts, or is it Roberts Reinhardt? Never remember. But it's The Man in the Lower 10. It's a mystery that she wrote. I believe that's the name of the title. Yeah, I think that's it. Have you? So that would be another favorite book. Yeah, okay. I kind of lost my train of thought there, sorry. This is getting pretty long, oh boy. Okay, I can't think of a film set on trains other than Murder on the Orient Express. Oh, what was that called? The Railway Children? There was another book by Edith Nesbit, and they made a really good movie about it. The Railway Children, yeah. That's another one about trains. Okay. You are lucky that you can ride in comfort through France and over the Pyrenees into Spain. Unlike Captain Jack Aubrey, post-captain, that's the name of the book, who had to don a bear suit and answer the name of Florida across the mountains. I've never read those books. Maybe I should get on board and read those. Have you got a favorite book featuring a manhunt or subterfuge? So the book that sprang to mind was The 39 Steps by John Buchan. And I had seen a couple of film adaptations. And then I had read that he wrote that book, and it was like the most popular book for the men in the trenches during World War I. And so I decided to try to read it, and I read it, and it was even better than the adaptations. And in fact, the adaptations put in romance that isn't in the book. It's just about this manhunt. There's no romantic thing going on, but it was really good. So that's the first book that sprang to mind, so I'm going to use that as my answer, The 39 Steps. The Spanish national anthem famously does not have any words. If you have seen them singing at football matches, they're really just humming along to the tune. What is your favorite instrumental-only piece of music? Are you prone to whistling? I cannot whistle. I have many, many favorite instrumental pieces of music because I do enjoy classical music, and I listen to it, whenever I'm in the car. I listen to it on the radio, or, I really enjoy classical music. But I'm going to say the piece that sprang to mind was The Moldau by Smetana. And I just remember that piece because way back before I got married, when I was just dating my husband, I lived in this little studio apartment in Baltimore. And I'm a terrible housekeeper, and even with my little studio. And so I remember one spring morning, I got up and I decided I had energy and I was going to clean my studio apartment up. And I started cleaning, sweeping and scrubbing. And I'd been going out with my husband for a while, and I'd had a lot of ambivalence, questions, hesitations. But while I was cleaning and the Moldau came on, I was listening to classical music because I listened to it even then. And I grew up listening to it. My mother always listened to classical music. The Moldau came on. It's beautiful. If you don't know it, it's named for a river. And that was the point, I'm blushing thinking about, where I realized that I was in love with my husband. He wasn't my husband yet. But like all the ambivalence just sort of swept away, and I suddenly was convicted that, yes, that I was in love. So I've always remembered that piece very fondly. Okay. Cronus Saturn, Devouring His Son by Francisco Goya is, to my mind, one of the most disturbing paintings I have seen. You can see it, too, if you visit the Prado Museum in Madrid. What is one of the most disturbing books and or paintings you have seen? So, to me, that, the Cronus, it reminds me of a gargoyle or something, like, in the Middle Ages, they were into that sort of thing. Who's the painter that does a whole bunch of that? It's from the north. And they're always very busy with lots of, I don't remember. But the two things that I'm going to say is, for paintings, I've always disliked that painting. Not disliked, but there's something about it that upsets me or depresses me, and I think it's called Christina's World by Andrew Wyatt. And it's this woman, this very lovely woman, but she's crawling through a field, and there's like a vast hill, and the house is far away, and you get the sense she can't walk, and she's crawling through the field, and there's something very depressing about that painting. So that I would say that there's probably other paintings that I would fit that category too, but that's the one that sprang to mind. And then what was the other thing? Most disturbing book. The Boston Strangler. I don't know who wrote it, but I read it as a teenager, and I didn't sleep for about 2 years. And even now, I get creeped out even thinking about it. Ugh, yeah. So I don't do true crime or anything like that. It scares the heck out of me. So yeah, I'll say that was the most disturbing book. Watching Cronus having his dinner has given you an appetite. So you repair to a restaurant to try Spain's national dish, the paella. If I were to visit your hometown, what restaurant would you take me to, and what would be the dish you would most recommend? So I think So I live in the DC metro area, and we have tons and tons of good restaurants and lots of multicultural type restaurants. Um, so I would guess I would go to something that was American. And we have, if I was going to go casual, I would take you to a restaurant called Clyde's, which started in Georgetown in DC and expanded into a local chain. And way back before it was cool, they were buying from local farmers, and they really advertised their seasonal cooking. So their menu would change depending on the season. It's always, never had a bad meal there. It's always delicious, even though it's a chain now. And near where I live, they have one in this town center that they built. It's just a pedestrian mall. It's all brick. And it has right next to the Clyde's restaurant, they have a big cafe area, outdoor dining area. And right next to it is a skating rink. So in the wintertime, because you're probably not sitting out in the cafe during winter, but there's a big skating rink. But in the summer, when it's not a skating rink, it's still in this nice enclosed area, and people bring their kids to just have their kids run around, or bring their scooters or trikes or something, and you can sit outdoors at Clyde's, and drink your wine, and you can watch your kids running around. So it's very convenient that way. Parents really like that. But they always have good food. It's very American, I would say. But if we were going to go a little fancier, I would take you to a little town called Middleburg. It's more like a village, and it's about an hour away. And if you've ever seen Alfred Hitchcock's movie Marnie, Middleburg is featured there. It's Virginia Hunt country, and there is a inn there called the Red Fox Inn that has been around since the 1700s, and it's very, very old and prestigious. And Jack and Jackie Kennedy like to go there, so if you go there, you'll see pictures of them when they were visiting the inn. And they have sort of a typical Hunt country menu, so there's always game on the menu, so you wouldn't go there. I mean, I think they do have vegetarian options now, but it's not really for vegetarians. But they always have something like venison or rabbit or quail or duck or pheasant or something like that on the menu, and it's decorated in sort of Virginia Hunt country, stuffed foxes and paintings of horses and that sort of thing. So it's very representative of that sort of culture from the Virginia Hunt country, just like when you see in Marnie, where she loves riding her horse. She keeps a horse there, and she's what's his name? Is it Sean Connery? He's the rich guy from there really are places like that with these beautiful homes and these rolling pastures where they raise racehorses, and they play polo and fox hunting. I don't know if they do fox hunting anymore, because that's not very PC anymore, but they used to. So I would take you to the Red Fox Inn if we were going to dress up a little bit and do something extra special. So let's see. And what dish would you recommend? I had the most delicious duck at Red Fox Inn, so I would recommend that. And at Clyde's, this is French, but their steak frites, delicious. I always get it when I go there. So yeah, those would be the two dishes. All right, and so now that's the last question. So he's going to have more. I think Mark has already come out with a second installment. So that took quite a lot of time. Oh my goodness. So I'm sorry about that. I hope that you can get through this. And I guess I'll talk to you later. So I hope you're doing well, and happy reading. Bye.